Good day, everyone. My name is Maryann, and I'm really glad to have you join me again today. We're going to do another block. It will become a 12.5-inch block, and when you sew it onto the next block, it'll be a 12-inch block. This is a really easy block to do. It's called the Arrowhead Puzzle. And as you can see, there are only two different rectangles. Well, there are 4 squares and 2 rectangles. And with the squares, 2 of them will be one color and the other 6 will be another color. And you can actually, where I have the red, you could do 2 of the same reds. You could do 2 different reds. Same thing with the blue. You could do all the blues the same. You could rotate the blues. You could do whatever you want. Very, very easy block to make. These are the dimensions to make it into a 12.5-inch block. The long strips are going to be 6.5 inches long. The squares are going to be 3.5 inches square. And the long strips will be 3.5 inches wide. Let's get started. I actually decided to do mine with this brown color. It's a batik fabric. Batik fabrics look the same on both sides, which is really nice. There's no right and wrong side. They're from Indonesia, really nice to work with, very tight weave. So I'm going to use those as my 2 center blocks that look red on the design. And then I chose 3 different blues to use for the blues. And this will be my background fabric. So we're going to start out by doing this long row. And of course, everything's going to be a 1/4-inch seam as usual when you're making a quilt. We'll start with the long row and we'll just go all the way through and then we'll put the rows together. So I'm going to need a long strip. I'm going to need a blue. And I'm going to need another background fabric. So I'm going to go ahead to my machine and sew those together now. I am using a foot that has the little ledge on the side, which gives me a perfect 1/4 inch. So that's what I'm going to use, and I don't have to measure my 1/4 inch. It'll come out pretty good. When you're using a 1/4 inch foot, you just run your fabric right along that ledge. Another thing sometimes I like to do is when I'm starting a seam, I'll use a piece of scrap fabric to start it so you don't get that tangled mess of thread at the beginning, which they call a bird's nest. Luckily, I don't have it with this one. It worked out fine. So I have the first 2 parts of that. I'm going to go ahead and put one of the background strips to this, and then I'm going to press all of these seams. And I'm always going to press them towards a darker fabric. Okay, we've got our first strip done. And this is what it's going to look like. And I'm going to go ahead and press it towards the blue. First, I like to set the seam by just ironing on the seam with it closed. And then I iron it towards the dark. Some people like to do their quilting by opening the seams. In other words, pressing the 2 sides open. I prefer to do them together unless it's going to leave a lot of bulk by doing it that way. Okay, so our first strip is done. Trim off this thread. Okay, for our next strip, we want a blue. And this is going to be instead of the red. And then we want another blue. Let's see if we go this way. I need the plain strip, the blue, the brown, and blue. Always make sure when you're putting your blocks together that you're putting the fabric face down. In other words, the good side of the fabric to the good side of the fabric. Unless you're sewing with batik, and then it doesn't matter which side because they both look good. Okay, so we've got those two together. Now we're going to put the tan. That's instead of the red that's in the picture. And if you feel more comfortable pinning them together, you can always pin them together. When it's the smallest seam, a lot of times I just hold them together like I'm doing now. Okay, so far, this way, I have the background fabric, the blue, this would have been the red, and I'm going to do another blue. I'm going to do a different blue. So now we have our second row done. And it's going to look something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and press the seams, and then I'm going to iron them towards the darker side. Now, since this is going to be against this piece, I want the seams to go in opposite directions. That's what I was looking at. So this seam's going up, so this one's going to go down, because actually they're kind of both dark, so I chose to do it that way. Okay, so we've got the first two strips done. And now we're going to be working on row 3. So again, it's another blue and the tan. And then we're going to do another blue after that. And just try to get your blocks as even as possible when you put them together. Sometimes, especially with smaller blocks, if you're even off like an eighth of an inch, when you put it all together, you'll be off quite a bit. So I always try to kind of match them up. It's hard to be perfect though, but as long as you're happy with it and it looks decent, that's good. Okay, so we have the blue, will be the red. We're going to put another blue. We'll do this one. And again, you'll see I'm going to go ahead and press this strip as I go along also. It just seems to work out better rather than pressing it all at the end and you have the seams going the wrong way. Okay, now this one is going to be catty corner with this one when I'm done. I have one more strip to come on, so I'm gonna make sure that I iron it in the other direction. Let's see how we want this. This one at the end. Okay, we're ready to press all of these. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this over, just make sure I'm pressing them in the opposite direction. So I'm gonna press these down here. And I'm gonna press this down here. And this down here, so I'm pressing them all in the downward direction. By spraying it with a little bit of either this best press or a little bit of starch or something, it just kind of makes your fabric crisper and it makes it easier to have accurate seams. Sometimes I actually press the fabric before I sew it together because it makes it so much better to sew. Okay, so we have our third strip done. And again, this is going to go down the bottom. And this is the top. And this is here. And now we've got our last strip. So we have the background fabric, we have a blue, and then we have a log. This is the last row now for this block, and then we will sew these 4 rows together and we will have our block. Okay, I've got my 4 rows done. What's left to do now is to sew the 4 rows together. And in this instance, I do usually pin the seams together so that they match up. So I'm going to take these first two and match them up. When you put the two seams together and you've got the seam allowances pressed in opposite directions, that's called nesting the seams. And it works out really nicely because you don't have that big bulk where the two seams come together from the one block of the other. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm pinning them so that they will be nested together and they'll match when they're sewn. And I always check to kind of just make sure that my seams are going to match. Okay, let's give that a try. I know I've mentioned in previous sessions to measure twice and cut once. So this is another thing. Look at your design twice before you stitch it so you don't have to use your seam ripper. Okay, so this is what we have so far, the first two rows together. And actually, I have a little bit of a discrepancy at the end of this, which I'll just kind of take care of when I'm done sewing everything together. Now, when I press this, most of the darker fabrics are on this side, so I'm going to press the seam to that side. Okay, going to add on our next row. Same thing, I'm going to go ahead and pin those seams. You should always take your thread and pull it to the back of your foot when you start a seam. I just did that. I usually tend to hold the thread a little bit too so it doesn't create that little bird's nest underneath. Okay, those seams seem to be matching up pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and press them. And then I'm going to open them up. And each of these has about the same amount of dark. We have 3 darker on both sides. It really doesn't matter which way you press. Let's see, press the right one. Okay, we're ready to sew on our very last row now. So this row is going to go this way. This way. This blue block is sticking out just a little bit more than I like. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim this one little piece here that seems to be sticking out. So this has the 2 seams that I need to match up. Okay, our block is complete. We just have to press everything. And press towards this side, which has more of the dark fabrics. see that that seam was giving me a hard time to press in the direction I wanted, but with the best press, it kind of falls right into place. Okay, press again. So this is our completed block. Now the only thing I would do right now, I would just kind of even off those parts that are kind of jutting out a little bit. The rest looks pretty good. Okay, so that's your completed Arrowhead puzzle block. And you can make a whole quilt with that. They'll go together very nicely. Or you can use it as part of the blocks in a sampler quilt, which is what we were planning to do. You might want to rearrange your blues a little differently so you don't have the two together if that bothers you. You know, you can have all the same blues. You can do whatever you want with that to make it your own. I see another little place here that I need to even off too. Okay, thank you for being with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this block. And as I said, you can use it individually, or you can put it in a whole, you can use it as a part of a sampler quilt, or you can make a whole quilt with this block and just mix and match it. Thank you.